Hello everyone, my name is Elias. I prepared this presentation for you guys to have maybe a small idea about how the Maronite Church is keeping its records. But to begin with, I want to thank Rootstack for this opportunity and of course Family Search project. And in order to participate with me in this presentation, I want to share with you this PowerPoint that I prepared for this video. So to begin with, you should know that the Maronite Church is one of the oldest oriented churches in the Middle East. It was founded by the first patriarch, Saint John Maron, in the 8th century, at the beginning of the 8th century. Its geographical locations mainly is in Lebanon, but as you can see, it is part from a larger church, which is the Syriac church. All the cities that you can see in the map on the right are cities and regions where the Syriac lived and, of course, prospered before the beginning of the Arab conquest. So in the 7th century, in 632, the new founded state, the Islamic State, will conquer the region, and it will manage to conquer the Syriac regions, mainly today Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine. So, of course, these Christians will have to choose between converting to the new religion or to live as dhimmi under the protection of the new empire, or to leave the regions. The people who are the Christians who decided to resist this conquest, they will become to be known as the Maronites, or the followers of Saint Maron, and this is where they took decision to live. They took hide. Hello everyone, my name is Elias. I'm a historian and lecturer at the Holy Spirit University of Kaslik. It is a Maronite Catholic university. I want to thank Rootstack for this opportunity, and I will be presenting an insight on the records of the Maronite Church. To begin with, I want to share with you a PowerPoint that I prepared for this presentation. So in order to understand the records, how they are preserved in the Maronite Church, of course, we need to understand its history. So the Maronite Church is one of the oldest Syriac churches in the world. It was founded by a hermit, a Syriac hermit known as Saint Maron, and it was organized definitely in the 7th century by its first patriarch. His name was Saint John Maron. The church is part of a larger church, which is the Syriac church. They used to speak the Syriac language, and the Syriac language is actually an evolution for the Aramaic language. So you can see here that all the regions colored in the map are big cities where the Syriac existed before the Islamic conquest. So in 632, the new Islamic state, the new founded state, of course, it was founded by the Prophet Muhammad. This state will conquer the region, and it will be a successful conquest when they managed to control the Persian Empire and a large part of the Byzantine Empire. So obviously, you will notice that the Syriac regions or the Syriac territories will be completely conquered by the Arabs, and this is where the Maronite Church will start a new era, which will be known as the Resistance era. Why? Because the Christians who decided to resist to the conquerors will be known later on by the Maronites, and they will leave their plains and their fertile lands to live in the mountains and the high mountains of Mount Lebanon. Like I said before, Saint Maron, on the left, he was an hermit. He actually created a new way of praying and exercising Christianity in the region. And on the right, you can see a portrait of Saint John Maron, the first patriarch who was the founder of the Maronite church. So, like I said before, the Maronites, once they decided to resist the conquerors, they took refuge in the Lebanese mountains and the deepest valleys and the highest mountains. These mountains actually they form 90% of the Lebanese territories today. So the Lebanese mountains, Mount Lebanon, will become a natural fortress for the Maronite Church. This church will not keep its traditional function to be only a religious organization. It will become, with the years, with centuries, a different and independent nation from the region. Why it succeeded in do this? Because they resisted economically, militarily, of course, and politically for more than 16 centuries. Unfortunately, the darkest phase in its history was actually when the Mamluks conquered the region and replaced the Ayyubids, and then it was replaced later on by the Ottomans. So to understand, actually, the Mamluks were a Sunni empire. They decided to conquer Mount Lebanon because they it was a punishment mission against the Maronites and against Mount Lebanon. There is a lot of findings that prove this history. The Maronites, especially in the Bshari region, they were killed by the Mamluks, and these are like the remainings of the people who took refugees in a grotto. So it's like a turning point in the history of the Maronite Church, because under the Mamluk rulers, the Maronites' demography was at its least. Unfortunately, this situation will last for like more than 200 years. So speaking about documents, speaking about records, speaking about manuscripts, it will be very difficult, because a community under oppression for more than 1,000 years, they didn't have the luxury to keep their records and to save their manuscripts. But under the Ottoman era, the Ottomans were not looking to control by force. I mean, of course, they exercised a full authority over its regions, but it was more like an exchange authority. I mean, they asked the people of different communities to pay taxes so they can be like protected or saved by the Ottomans. So this is like gave the Maronite Church a relative security and maybe a relative freedom. Why? Because they managed to start a reorganization for the whole community. And we can say that starting the 16th century, the Maronite Church will prosper demographically, economically, for many, many reasons. We're not gonna attack all these reasons in this presentation. But the turning point in the history of the Maronites was the creation of the Mutasarrifate of Mount Lebanon, which is an autonomous Mutasarrifate or autonomous region inside the Ottoman Empire. This autonomous region will last for more than 60 years. And here we can talk that the Maronite Church started its organization on the level of the church institutions, on the level of economic reforms, on the level of cultural reforms. And this is where we can start to find records. I mean, the bulk of the Maronite church records are dated between 1840 and 1950. Why? Like I said before, the Maronite Church started its organization and started to count its people and to follow their, their matters, their problems, their issues. And here we can say that we have a big number of records that can give us a good insight on the history of the Maronite Church. Of course, the church nation will succeed in 1920, after World War I, to create a country that can protect its people, and this country will be known as the Lebanese nation. The relation between the Maronite Church and Lebanon is very tight. It's based in history. So the French, they created the Greater Lebanon in 1920, and this Lebanon will become like the political entity that will make the life of the Maronites more safer and more easier. And of course, the state now will take the role of the church, and it will start to writing the records, doing the demographical statistics, and try to follow up with the matters of its citizens. Of course, we will not go through the different phases of the Lebanese history, but once Lebanon was independent in 1943, the Maronite Church became like an institution that was protected by the system, protected by the Lebanese system. As you can see here, the distribution or geographic distribution of the church is all over the Lebanese territories, from the north till the south. We have more than 900 churches that are distributed in Mount Lebanon and even in the Bekaa and in South Lebanon. We can say that every church has its own records. I mean, every village, every Maronite village has its own records. These records are preserved in the church and secured by the priest. Until now, they are not digitized in total for many reasons: lack of funding, even lack of human capital. But the Patriarchate, which is located in Junia and in Diman in the north, they already digitized their records and digitized their documents. So we are talking about two kinds of records. We have the central records, which are preserved by the Patriarchate, the Patriarch, and they are well preserved and digitized. But the other records, where we can find a lot of records that are still kept in the churches, they still need to be digitized and to be saved, if we can say that. This is an example of records. These records, they cover the immigrants, they cover the newborn, they cover the marriage, they cover the death. So you can track easily the history of the Maronite Church, of its community, from the 19th century till our days. The language of these records are mostly in Arabic. They are manuscript, handwritten records, but you have a big number of records written in Syriac. So if you are willing to work on these records, you need to learn Syriac and to learn the Lebanese dialect, not the Arabic Fusha, because the Lebanese language, it's an evolution for the Syriac language, and it's a specific language spoken by the Lebanese people. So, but we can say in general that the Maronite Church is a well-documented organization. They have like a decision to track and to get in touch with all the Maronites in the world. لأنه simply we can say that there is no Maronite in the world that he is not in connection with Lebanon. I want to thank you for your time, and I hope I managed to give you like a small insight on the records of the Maronite Church. Of course, the Maronite Church is a persecuted church because the surrounding areas, the surrounding countries are, of course, non-Christian countries. So keeping the records or preserving the records, it's a matter of surviving, not a matter of technical work or, I don't know, digitization work. Thank you for your time, and I hope next time we will be presenting face to face.